Today on the Price of Admission podcast, we're diving deep into a story of transformation and rediscovery. Our guest, Jeremiah McCloud, is a man who's walked through fire and emerged stronger on the other side. Jeremiah is a fellow USNA grad, Marine Corps vet, someone whose journey is nothing short of inspiring. From enlisting in the Marines during 9/11, he's a class of 2009. Jeremiah is another fellow Marine Corps veteran with combat advising experience and a former communications and signals intel officer. He's battled some personal storms of PTSD and alcohol addiction. Now an advocate for plant-based medicines like psilocybin and ibogaine, where he's found profound healing and a renewed purpose. Jeremiah is now channeling his life experiences into a mission to empower others. Join us as we explore this journey through hardship, recovery, and his mission to empower others with leadership and stress resilience coaching. This is a story about second chances. Turn down for what? Excited to have Jeremiah McCloud on with us. Price of admission. Born in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I lived in Oklahoma for 1.5 years. Shawnee.
Okay, yeah.
How far away?
Well, I was born in Missouri, but I lived in Broken Arrow for most of my childhood.
Got it. Do you remember how far away Shawnee was from Broken Arrow? I want to say it was like 45 minutes.
That may be right. I don't recall.
Okay. I was doing some oil field work out there at the time. You moved to Kansas very early high school, spent most of your high school years there in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
That's right. Yep.
And you joined the Marine Corps after 9/11.
Yeah.
Served as an enlisted Marine with a communications focused MOS for 4 years. Did the Naval Academy prep school, as did I. And then you went to the dark side, became an officer through the United States Naval Academy from 2006 to 2009, graduated in 2009. That was 1 year ahead of me. You went back into the Marines, commissioned as an officer, and you are what we call a Mustang.
That's right.
There's a few other Mustangs on this podcast that I've had already. One's Cameron Marshall. I don't know if you knew him. Yeah. I'm sure you did. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome dude. He's an episode 2 and episode 54 guy. His episodes I thought were really good with identity, values, purpose, things like that, as he was kind of making a turn there himself with some stuff. And then episode 49, a guy named Justin North, I actually talked to him a couple days ago.
Yep. I remember both those cats.
Yeah. I had just random. I was talking to him about, hey, I'm thinking about starting up this business. What's your legal advice on this topic? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm talking to this guy. You know him? He was like, yeah, I do. Well, what kind of memories you got about him? And he goes, and when I was, the first words out of his mouth when I said, I'm talking to you, he said, oh, Fatty.
Fatty, yeah.
How'd you get that nickname?
It was when I was in the Marines, when I was enlisted.
Okay.
One of the sergeants in my squadron, so I was with Marine Wing Communication Squadron 18, MWCS 18, and I was on the maintenance side, so I was in the maintenance platoon, communications maintenance. And one of my sergeants, a dude named Sergeant Butch, who I think went on to become a warrant officer.
Yeah.
But he and I would always joke about some Adam Sandler skits, and there was an old skit from the 90s called Fatty McGee. And every time he saw me, he was in a different shop than I was, but we bumped into each other quite a bit. Every time he saw me, I was eating something, having a snack.
That'll do it.
And then when we were in the field on an entire squadron exercise, every time he saw me, chowing down, and I said, hey, Sergeant, chow is continuous. And he's like, oh, Fatty McCloud. So it just stuck.
Gotcha. So that's where it came from. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, some other things he had memories about you guys. He said, and I think I remember this after he said it, was that sophomore year, maybe as priors, the prior enlisted Marine group had a unauthorized Marine Corps ball, because it was one of those things that Like you couldn't leave. Maybe it was our freshman year. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and it was a guy named Colonel Ripley was in attendance that year.
Oh, I don't recall being there with Colonel Ripley.
Oh, okay.
I remember some of the Marine Corps birthday balls there at the academy. Of course, Colonel Ripley would show up. He lived right outside Gate 3, so I mean, he would just walk on,
Yeah,
and join us. And I remember, he's a legend.
yeah,
You got the diorama of Ripley at the bridge, all that kind of stuff there in Memorial Hall.
yeah.
And but he would just come and stand with us. He wasn't with the brass. He would just come and stand with us and just talk to us and have a drink.
Nice.
Um, the those underground balls that we used to have, those underground birthday balls, if I may.
Yeah,
So we started those my sophomore year, yeah, Justin's freshman year, um, because we weren't invited to the birthday ball as Marines, and we thought that was a bit offensive to us. We were Marines,
yeah.
you know. We got the invitation after the Marines on the yard got the invitation, after other permanent personnel got the invitation, then it was extended to midshipmen, and it was within that population that we got the invitation. And we thought that wasn't right because we had earned our title.
Yeah.
So we decided to have our own, and that lasted until after I graduated. I went back as an officer. I think it was 2009. I think it was that that November, and or maybe the year later, maybe 2010. But I came up and I was like the speaker at that year's event. We put together our own, ceremony. Did all the stuff. Read Lejeune's message. Read the commandant's birthday message. Had a bartender. Had a DJ. Secured a venue. And the first couple of years, we wore either a suit or dress blues or whatever. After that, we decided let's just go ahead and stay in the midshipman uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And would love to know if that's still going on, if that tradition has continued. But yeah, we did it for a few years.
Nice. Well, he had to say something about, that I guess maybe Colonel Ripley's granddaughter was there one year, and there was a balancing act done by all the prior enlisted Marines with showing the respect that all of you had for Colonel Ripley, but at the same time, she's out there, pretty big distraction for the group. So I guess you must have missed that one.
I think I might have missed that one. Yeah, that's fun.
He also said y'all had some pretty good times at the Fleet Reserve Club. As a prior group, your bond there as a prior group being pretty awesome, and that's where you guys had some additional bonding time.
Yeah, a lot of beer drank there.
For sure, and we're going to talk about that in this story. So next memory, Elvin Vasquez. He was in my company at 21st Company at the Naval Academy, 1 year ahead, so y'all were classmates. He said, Fatty McCloud, the type of man that would take his shirt off of his back for anyone, no matter what he was going through personally. He's the type of friend I will call even years after, from whatever, pick up right where we left off. Life gets busy. Our personalities often change throughout our lived experiences, but the character of who we are at the core only gets stronger and more refined. For Jeremiah, those are loyalty, humility, and his uncanny ability to command a room no matter where as a natural leader. Fatty is undeniably one of the most humble individuals that I've had the honor of calling family. His humility is both a weakness and a strength. A weakness in that sometimes I feel he got in his own way many times to let others go or yield to others so that they may, after something he really wanted to achieve himself, they may go and do that, and it would cause him self-doubt. But a strength, and that his humility is one of the most endearing qualities, and that is what naturally pulls his friends in. Once you're in his circle, you're in. Filled with people that love him for who he is, an amazing father, Marine, and friend. I'm honored to be a part of his circle. When I met Jeremiah like 21 years ago, he immediately established himself as a leader in the room. We all instantly gravitated to him, fed off his gregarious personality and our collective yearnings to be led. Even as Marines and sailors, with huge personalities of our own, he was the guy. And he happily and naturally assumed the role with ease. Sergeant McCloud. Thing is, he was the guy in the back of the room being himself while everyone else was posturing. I've looked up to him ever since. I'm excited to see when his path takes him to great places. Fatty's a diamond in the rough, something a good friend can only say. And sooner than later, someone's going to discover it, and his light will shine for the world to see. I believe that. Honored to call him my friend. So
I'm just like emotional hearing that from Elvin. I talked with him on Christmas Eve.
nice.
Was driving in the car with my daughter, and Elvin called me. He's in Hawaii, so I think he's an OPSO at one of the units there currently. And he called me. I had texted him like, "Hey, how's it going? You know, how's life?" And he called me and put him on speaker. And I'm like, "Hey, brother, I'm in the car. You're on speaker. My daughter's in the background." And he just starts cracking up. He's like, "Oh, of course." Letting
Didn't
him
drop any
know.
F-bombs, did he?
Yeah, we just can't be, as open with each other in that moment. But I'm just floored by his comments.
All right, so back to the intro. Graduate, you held multiple roles as a signals intel and ground electronic warfare officer at Camp Lejeune. You embedded as a combat advisor to the ANCOP, Afghan National Civil Order Police, in Lashkar Gah. I've been there too as an advisor. It was with the Afghan Army,
Okay.
but definitely a green on blue peak. Green on blue attacks peaked during that time, and for those that don't know, green on blue, what was going on there is you'd have insider Afghan forces that would turn on American military folks.
Yep.
After this, you transitioned to civilian life. 2014, jobs in marketing, consulting, house renovations, sales rep roles, IT project management. Now living in Cary, North Carolina. Dug into photography and painting as hobbies. You're an advocate for state and federal policy changes for greater access to plant medicines. So a bulk of our conversation today will be about that, I believe. You've had experience navigating the trials of PTSD, alcohol addiction, and personal loss. I think your story is going to be one definitely of open-mindedness, perseverance, and hope. Now on a mission to heal and inspire. Channeling these experience is into coaching and advocacy for resilience and leadership. Sort of a professional pivot moment for you, sort of sounds.
Yeah. Really great synopsis, man.
Hey, I had some chat GPT help, but I'll change it up a little bit. Tell us your story, man. I'm interested. I mean, like I said, I was on LinkedIn. I saw you very active on very vocal about plant medicines. It's been a study point for me lately, learning more about it, and I figured I want to talk to you about it. So, similar backgrounds, not the Mustang thing, but interesting. So, tell us the story.
So, it's been recent for me, the last couple of years, getting into greater use of entheogenic medicines, what may rightly be called psychedelics. But yeah, just to kind of go back, you captured, I enlisted in 2001.
What made you do that?
What made me enlist?
Yeah. What happened?
So I had applied to the academy. I was in a cadet program. If you're familiar with the Sea Cadets, Naval Sea Cadets, did that throughout high school, was in Civil Air Patrol as well, and knew I wanted to be in the military in some capacity. Learned about the Naval Academy through the Sea Cadet program. Really struggled freshman year in high school with going to school. I actually got arrested for truancy. Placed into state custody for a short time.
What's truancy?
Skipping school.
I should know that. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, literally put into handcuffs, put in the back of a squad car, taken away for skipping school. Had to stand before the judge, before I got arrested. And he's like, "Hey, man, if you skip one more day, I'm going to send one of my officers to grab you." I was like, "Okay." So I skipped another day. And true to his word, I got arrested. Spent about a month in like a behavioral rehab facility for troubled teens. And I mean, just within a day, they were like, "You don't belong here, brother. Like, you don't belong here." And that was really my first sort of come to Jesus moment, pivot point. I looked at where my life had taken me at the moment, taken out of my family's home. And I said, "This is not for me. I'm going to do everything I can to get onto a different trajectory." The Naval Academy became my North Star at that time. So I had
Why Naval Academy versus, say, Army or Air Force at that time?
I mean, I was in the cadet program. So,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that had become for me, an avenue to really express my interests and my values, and to really find some ground under my feet. And so I, really enjoyed that. Was fortunate enough through that program to go out to California, Coronado, did some training out there on the Navy base. Went to Little Creek a couple summers in a row and trained with the special warfare guys. And was like, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the naval service. Love it." Thought I was going to go into the teams, the SEAL teams, like that's, the Charlie Sheen kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I applied from high school, I mean, I did everything. Got, the sports. I got the varsity letter, got good grades, all that kind of stuff. Applied and admitted to using cannabis. This is when the application was paper.
Yeah.
So, fill it out with a number 2 pencil and mail it in. And admitted to using cannabis. And the reason I did, nobody would have known. Nobody would have known. The reason I did was I reasoned that, the Naval Academy had a code at the time. We don't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anyone who does. And I figured if I'm going to go to a place like that and embody that type of value, then I need to embody that value right now. So I admitted to the cannabis use and got disqualified. Sought a waiver for the disqualification, and it, didn't happen. Just didn't work out. And I remember sitting there the day I got the letter back from the chief medical officer there at the Naval Academy. "Hey, sorry, we're not going to give you a waiver. Best of luck next time. You can reapply in the next year or whatever." And I said, "Okay, what now?" Just sat at a desk just like this and said, "What now?" And the only answer was Marines. The recruiters had been really working hard on trying to get me in, building rapport and doing their recruiter thing since I was my junior year of high school. And that felt right. So enlisted, was in the delayed entry program when 9/11 happened. So I was already, I had a ship date already lined up. 9/11 happened. Said, "Oh shit, I just joined the Marines. All right, let's go."
So you joined and then 9/11 happened.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, just hadn't shipped out yet.
Got it.
Shipped out the next month, October 2001. And today, coincidentally, is the day I graduated recruit training.
Nice.
In 2002, January 18th.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thanks. And so that was what led me to the Marines. Boot camp, I was a contract PFC because I'd had that Sea Cadet time, that time in that cadet program. I was a squad leader there at recruit training. From there, went up to 29 Palms. No, from there went to Camp Pendleton for combat training, and then to 29 Palms for my specialty school at the Marine Corps Communication Electronics School. And then from there, got orders to Okinawa, to the comm squadron there.
Gotcha.
And the rest of it, I was there in Okinawa. Really enjoyed the job. It was technical. It was challenging. A good bunch of dudes. And I was a hard charger. I wanted to go for more. Got meritoriously promoted, went up on a meritorious corporal board, and beat out the more experienced guys who had gone on multiple boards before. And that was fun. I extended. We had a change of command in the battalion or in the squadron, and the new squadron commander came in just full of piss and vinegar. I mean, just ready to get us to work, and not just work on the technical side, but work in the Marine skills as well, taking us to the field, impressing on us the importance of our, naval culture, our ties to the sea, instead of just doing the geeky tech stuff. And that resonated with me. I love that.
And I was going to ask you, like, so was that good or bad? And
it was really good. Yeah, I loved it because it added some variety to the day, to the operations, and increased our proficiency in Marine skills. One of the things he did, his name was Stephen P. Corcoran, Lieutenant Colonel at the time. So the new squadron commander came in and did this intercompany competition.
Yeah.
And so we had all these different events, land nav, team-based events, stuff in the pool, all based in, legit Marine Corps skills. And I recall the commander was on our team as we were doing this timed event going from point to point on Camp Foster on Okinawa. I mean, we were wingers, but he was trying to make us a little more capable.
Yeah, for sure.
And one of my guys, I was a corporal at the time, one of my guys was struggling under we had a ruck that was weighted. Oh, it was the radio. And this is before radios were small. And he was struggling under the weight of that. So I'm like, all right, you take a break. Let me take that. I got big shoulders. At the end of the week, this is like a week-long thing, events every day. At the end of the week, we did squadron PT, and I was one of the NCOs up at the front leading one of the exercises. The commander came up to me after that, after we dismissed and all that kind of stuff, right at the barracks. He said, "Hey, Corporal McCloud," turn around, and it's the colonel. I go, Jesus. He's like, "Hey, what are your test scores? Like, what did you get on the SAT or the ACT or whatever?" And so I told him, and he said, I want you to apply to the Naval Academy.
Nice.
And he didn't know that I'd applied previously.
Yeah.
Said, okay, sir, done, And
did you tell him, hey, the reason why I didn't get in the first time I applied is because I
did not. I actually got a waiver when I enlisted too.
Awesome.
But yeah, it was really, it felt like a purposeful conversation with him, kind of destiny kind of thing, wanted to do this, didn't get in the first time, been knocking it out of the park as a Marine. And the commander says, hey, you should do this. And he stayed pretty hot on the staff for the next several months as I went through the process of making the application again, getting all the medical exams done and the basketball toss and all that stupid stuff, and got in. They sent me to the prep school. So summer of 2004, departed Okinawa, Japan, and went straight to Newport, Rhode Island.
Nice.
And it was, I tell you, man, it was a culture shock because, here I am coming from the Fleet Marine Force, corporal, can do anything. And I had been a barracks manager, so I managed facilities, I managed check-in, get to Newport, Rhode Island, get to the prep school there. And the OOD was like on phone watch, he wasn't there physically. It was just a phone call. So I'm like, how do I get a room? How do I get linens? He's like, oh yeah, just go pick one. Just, go find a room that's open. I was like, what are you talking about? That is not how we do things.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. Checked in the next day, wearing alphas and all that kind of stuff. And, the rest is kind of history. Got to the academy the next year.
Yeah. How was your academy experience? If you had to sum it up in a few sentences.
I think other people have said it this way, and I think it makes sense for me as well. Great place to be from. terrible place to be.
Perfect.
For a couple reasons. I was promoted to sergeant while I was at the prep school. So when I reported to the academy, I was, again, in alphas, because that's how we do it, as, Sergeant McCloud.
Yeah.
That really, really meant something to me, to the extent that I had a chip on my shoulder.
Sure.
And that chip was there for a few years at the academy. And I bumped heads with a lot of folks, rightly and wrongly. It caused a lot of challenge for me personally, just because, you bump heads with the upperclassmen, they're going to make life tough for you.
Yeah.
Academically, awesome place. I mean, just a phenomenal institution for higher education. I was able to go on a research trip, a funded research trip, senior year, first a year, with a couple other mids and a couple other, faculty members to West Africa. And it was a trip funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And we were there to essentially try to answer the question, can Al-Qaeda use existing trafficking networks in West Africa to move WMD? So we got to go to Senegal and a country just south of there, Guinea-Bissau. And of interest, of note, is about a week or two before we departed CONUS, I think it might have been just a week, the president and the Army Chief of Staff of Guinea-Bissau were assassinated on the same night. Coordinated attack. And so that was beautiful timing for us, because we got to go, be on site in that country that had just experienced this loss. Not beautiful in the sense of the loss, but in the sense of what it meant for the research we were doing and the information we were trying to gather. Really cool. Got to apply my French language skills that were actually good at the time. They're not anymore. Some of the interviews we did were, it was in French, Portuguese, English, all in the same interview. Just really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, the academy overall, great educational experience. I think we all can say that there were good officers and staff there, and there were not so good officers and staff there.
Sure. You learn from everybody, good and bad.
That's right. Was really great to graduate and shake the president's hand. That's a really rare thing. So yeah. I was, pleased to be able to do that.
So from there, you move on, you go back into the Marine Corps, you're commissioned, you do TBS, you go to MOS school, you hit the fleet.
That's right. Yep. Get through MOS school in Dam Neck, Virginia, at the Navy Marine Corps Intelligence Training Center as a signals intelligence officer. And then I got assigned to 2nd Radio Battalion there at Camp Lejeune. Was the radio reconnaissance platoon commander as my first job. Moved into the training officer role in the 3. And our S3 is in a skiff. So I actually sat in a skiff managing an Excel spreadsheet. Not for me.
Yeah.
Moved to one of the companies from there as XO. Loved that.
Why? I hear a lot of XOs that have that experience end up enjoying it. What made it that way for you?
Yeah, for me, it was FaceTime with the platoon commanders every day. Okay. And so at the time, the short stint I had as XO is maybe 2, 3, 4 months before I got pulled for the advisor tour. The company commander was out of country with a detachment supporting a joint operation elsewhere. So I was sort of kind of running the company, with obviously with the help of my expert staff. And that was just a ton of fun to be able to make sensible decisions based on realities, listen to the experts and apply their expertise in real time and see what happens. And good things happen, and
awesome.
then
so mentorship and all the fun stuff.
Yeah. The stuff you want to do as a leader, right? Make a difference for folks. And then working through personal and professional issues with the platoon commanders as they come up. Hey, everybody's demanding time from the XO.
Yeah, as much of a mentorship type of position it is, it's also a killer learning experience too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Learned a ton about radban operations, doing that, radio battalion operations. We were doing a bit differently at that time because a company is how many platoons normally? 3, maybe 4. Had 7.
4, yeah.
Yeah, we had 7 platoons.
Goodness.
It was
the whole Marine Corps rule of 3 is, you really can't manage effectively more than 3. That's what it's broken down, 3, 3, 3, 3.
Yeah, so it was interesting. But yeah, learned a ton more about the equipment we were using, how those pieces were employed tactically, the support structure that enabled that employment, and then just the regular company stuff, training and deployment, boxes to check, all that kind of stuff. But just a really good experience. And then got pulled for the.
Well, I was just gonna say, and then you got pulled for the advisor thing. So let's dive into that one. How was that experience for you?
It was weird. It was really weird. So I was on 2 teams, deployed with one team. Did the workup. We formed. Went through all of our training. Did our culmination exercise out in 29 Palms. Phenomenal training, just phenomenal. You got skills on our own internal weapon systems as well as the enemy weapon systems. Yeah, so formed with, let's just call it team 1, right? That was the first team I was on. And what was weird about it was a couple things. Our commander had never been a ground commander before. He was a lieutenant colonel, test pilot. He flew Cobras.
Yeah.
Had written 1 fit rep his entire career. Had no business being a ground team commander.
Yeah.
And he knew it. He admitted that. He's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
There's a lot of advisor teams that got put together that way.
Yeah, just kind of
extra. Yeah.
We also had a woman on our team, a female Marine. Not terribly a bad thing ever, except when you go to a country that doesn't respect women at all.
Yep.
And
there's a cultural thing there.
Vetted with, Afghan senior commanders. So she was removed from the team, finished the workup, deployed. Before we deployed, we knew which Afghan unit we were going to go in bed with. And in the news, in the public space, just news, we had already learned that unit had been disbanded and that they no longer existed. And so we left CONUS without a mission. Get to Afghanistan, get through RSO and I at Camp Leatherneck. The night before we were scheduled to displace, to move down to that position with a unit that no longer existed, the team leader was like, hey, General, what are we going to do? He's like, let me think about it. Why don't you just hang out for a little bit longer? So what happened was our team was split and we were all based elsewhere.
Yeah.
I had a choice, I was given the choice, do you want to stay here on Leatherneck or do you want to go and be on another team? It's like, I don't want to stay here. You send me to an outpost. So landed with the ANCOP team.
Yeah.
Interesting, just entry point to that deployment. The reason I landed with that team is because the team leader at that time had lost faith in his intelligence officer, and he was asking for a replacement. I said, okay. So get down there, and as was my custom, I wanted to better understand how they got to that point. So I had FaceTime with the commander. An infantry lieutenant colonel was our team leader. Had FaceTime with him, hey, just give me the lay of the land. Where are we at? What's going on with you and the other intel guy? And had FaceTime with that intel officer who was essentially my peer. And realized that it was really just a miscommunication. Within a couple weeks, everything was fine. The commander was happy with the products that we were producing. support that we were providing, and he did not get rid of that primary intel officer. So I essentially became the understudy.
Okay.
8 months out of a 12-month deployment. At about 8 months, we pulled back. We indexed and came home. The only real action we saw was a sister advisor team in the area got hit with a vehicle-borne IED, sort of target of opportunity thing. They were coming around their normal convoy route back to the British base there in Lashkar at the time.
Yeah.
And a vehicle was sitting in an alleyway, so it was blind to the convoy, and they hit the six, the trail Vic in the convoy.
Like out of a wall?
Kinda, yeah.
Gotcha.
Vaporized the attacking vehicle, killed 12 locals, absolutely rocked the guys in the truck. No KIA.
Awesome.
Bad day, just bad day. Sent them straight up to Leatherneck for immediate TBI care. Just a shitty day.
Yeah.
My team was QRF.
Got it.
Otherwise, I don't know. It was funny, I'm sure everybody's got a story like this, but we'd sit there in our little outpost and we'd hear small arms fire. We'd hear rocket blasts. And for the first few months, what the hell's going on? Go check the G-boss, go see what's, and you're just freaking out. Month 4, I guess we'll go check it out. It just wasn't a big deal anymore.
Yeah. I still jump at loud noises, firework nights. Anytime like one of my kids makes a loud noise, deep breath.
Yep.
I didn't really notice that except for the past couple of years.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And just knowing a little bit about the path that you've been on, I wonder if that has to do with the decrease in drinking.
It might be. Yeah, absolutely. Before it was just like I could drink and block it out.
Yeah. Just kind of mutes your response.
Not a problem now. So,
which is awesome.
Well, let's get into that then.
Okay.
I want to talk your transition, because I think that's a key thing that we hit on these episodes, and then after that we'll get into more of the plant medicine side of it. Talk about your transition. You come back, you transition into the civilian world. How's that go for you?
It was rough. This is before SkillBridge. This is before, the support that exists today. It was a week-long class that we called, SEPS and TAMP. SEPS and TAMP. I don't know. There's a bunch of different acronyms.
It's a quick thing. You go through these classes, you do the checklist.
And you're sitting there, and I was a captain with 13 years at the time, and I'm sitting there with these corporals and PFs finishing up their first 4 years. Mm-hmm. Little different outlook, but still sitting in the same class. Like, hey, that's where everybody goes. That was the congressional mandate. Left active duty June 2014. Really backed that up to maybe April for terminal leave. And so this was just 5-6 months after I came back from the deployment. So pretty quick turnaround to get out. Didn't have a plan. I was just like, I'm out, because the commanders I'd worked for, especially my final commanders, were just garbage. They were trash.
What happened
there? The lieutenant colonel I worked for at the G2 at second follow me. Was just a really fragile ego. And when you give somebody power in the environment of a place like the Marine Corps, and
a bunch of A-types.
Yeah. It was bad. It was a really toxic environment. Nobody liked being at work. None of the Marines were happy. the dude would just yell at people, would yell at the junior Marines, would yell at officers in front of the junior Marines. So just no bueno. On one occasion, he came to my desk, and I worked next to his office in the bullpen with other captains and one second lieutenant, who was our human guy.
Yeah.
And this was normal work. The colonel would come in, we'd talk about stuff, normal stuff, right? And so he came in one day, and I stayed at my desk. I stayed sitting here because he was asking for something that I needed to be on the computer for. And then he just lit into me. Why aren't you standing up? Just lit into me, put me at attention, ripped me up and down, huffed out, bounced out of the room, came back in just a few moments later. You're dismissed to quarters. I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, go home. I don't want you here. Like, okay, that's not
very
good.
Well.
Had a conversation with his boss, another lieutenant colonel who is the actual assistant chief of staff for intelligence. And he's like, look, I'll have a conversation with him. Just go home and take the weekend. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like, that was it. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. I could not conscience remaining in the Marine Corps at that time and finding another officer like that above me. I just didn't want to do it.
Got it.
So was offered career designation while I was there, turned that down. The only lieutenant colonel I worked with two lieutenant colonels, just like 10 feet away. The only person to congratulate me for getting awarded that was my team leader from Afghanistan. Called me up on the phone. Like, he figured out my desk number and just called me up on the phone. Hey, congrats. And the two guys that I worked with just didn't give a shit,
Yeah.
But so anyway, left active duty, went to the 1 or 2 or 3 of the Service Academy career conferences. Nothing really came out of those, except, I was introduced to one company that still had an opening a few months later. Contacted them. This was a healthcare company down in South Carolina. So I went down there, moved, left active duty, moved, was, newly married. Did that job, and it was just not good. It was daily operations, managing a computer, managing a keyboard.
Okay.
Didn't fit with my, with what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted. Also, concurrently at the same time, I was doing a full-time MBA through the Darden School of Business, University of Virginia. And it was just a lot. There was a lot going on. My wife at the time got pregnant. It was mine, thankfully.
That's good.
But so a lot going on. Transition from the Marine Corps, brand new to the civilian force after a career in the service. Doing the MBA thing, it was full time. And then a baby coming. So just a ton to pile on. So left that job, moved up to the DC area from South Carolina after my child was born. My child was born there in Hilton Head. Moved up to the DC area, did some consulting for a bit, finished the MBA, and thought I wanted to go into marketing, so I did that. Was an in-house marketing director for a bit, worked at a startup, which didn't last long because startups are, really tough. And then just kind of bounced from there. Lost touch, and this happens. You leave active duty, when you're in, you're a guest, and when you're out, you're a pest, Lost touch with some buddies, and that happens. But there is an emotional cost, when you're not surrounded by that same culture, by the same support network, when you're not, doing the PT in the morning and meeting them for, beers in the evening or whatever, whatever the cadence of life is when you're on active duty. Life really changes and it feels different. What you can do for yourself, the structures you can put in place becomes really important. Fast forward through a lot of that turmoil, that professional turmoil. My wife at that time, my ex-wife now, and I separated. Really abrupt, not my decision. And at that time, they moved back down here to North Carolina. We were living up in Alexandria, Virginia. I was unemployed, separated from, my significant other and my child. And my best friend from my combat team stopped talking to me. We lived on the same block, walked into each other's homes. Kids were bathing together and playing together every day, all that kind of stuff. Just a real like family, settled, put down roots kind of feel, and then up in smoke.
Okay. So, lost your best friend. What happened there?
Yeah. It was tough. So, my ex we'd separated. She'd moved back down here to North Carolina with our daughter. And at the time, I think I mentioned this earlier, my buddy we were living on the same street, just a couple blocks from each other, walking into each other's homes and everything without knocking. I mean, just, real family kind of feel.
Right.
And he had been on the combat team with me. So we were real tight. And while we were deployed, his wife and my then wife were real tight. So it was just a very connected family. Or, two families. When, when my ex and I separated and she had moved down, he had moved his family across town, I think to Arlington or somewhere. And we just kind of lost touch. I kept pinging him like, hey, man, you want to get together? You want to, like meet up and see how we're doing? I'm busy, maybe another time. And that, 3-4 times of that, 3-4 iterations of that over the next, 6 to 12 months. Once I moved down here, so towards the end of 2019, I moved down to North Carolina. I had stabilized financially, had gotten a job with an ad agency there in Alexandria. Was with them for about a year, quit to be able to move down here. And because my manager at that ad agency had lied to me, so I was done. I was like, I'm out. Once I moved down here, 2019, 2020, the whole world kind of got kicked in the nuts. That was when I was starting to hit rock bottom, and just a ton of emotional distress, mental health problems. And I reached out to that buddy by email, hey man, like, is there something I've done that I need to apologize for to help repair this relationship? And he replied by email, no, man, you're all good. Hope you get the help you need. And that was that. Not real sure, looking at it, trying to look at that more objectively, there was a bit of turmoil between my ex and me. It was a really abrupt separation and just, removal of, things and child from our home. And so I can imagine, a decision being made like, hey, we want to protect his family, his mental health, all that kind of stuff. And just, let's keep this problem at a greater distance. Beyond that, not sure.
Gotcha. So that's rock bottom. What happens now?
Yeah. So that started rock bottom.
Starts rock bottom.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, 2019, 2020, 2021. I was unemployed all that time. End of 2019 through all of 2020. I worked at the tail end of 2020 as a salesman, outside salesman, literally outside, going door to door, selling house painting services for a local company. And earned income for 2020 was $3,000. for a 12-month period, which was just
Up
devastating.
here. Yeah.
And so 2021, May-ish, I got on with a local company here as an inside salesperson, doing enterprise telecom sales. And it just was not right. You know, I was sitting there with brand new college grads who've done nothing except graduate college. And still having a ton of mental health and emotional distress. Working with
it?
Say again.
How'd you deal with that?
Not well. You know, I didn't have the routines and the tools that I have now.
Okay.
I tried to do, you know, breath work here and there, use cannabis daily. And you know, that helped some, but created other problems.
Okay.
You know, it's tough to fund a daily use of that sort when you're not making enough money, you know?
Yeah.
And so it just had a lot of periods of distress. You know, was working with my VA clinician for what that was worth. I think I started working with, I think it was 2022. End of 2021, I was at another ad agency doing a federal client project, and then moved to a company called Greencastle in early 2022. Greencastle, 100% veteran owned and operated, run by a Naval Academy grad, SEAL type. Really good spot for veterans. Great place to land and transition and have folks who know the suck, you know.
Yeah.
And I stayed there, you know, professionally for a couple of years. Yeah, so I mean, rock bottom was honestly probably peaked for me maybe 2020. Yeah, maybe 2020. Middle of 2020, I had checked myself into the VA because I was suicidal and just was not able to manage. Stayed a week there, you know, at the VA facility, and was released after about a week. You know, and it was a self-admitted thing. It wasn't like, you know, hey, you've got to do this. There, you know, it wasn't causing trouble in the community or anything like that. Another Marine who lived next door to me helped me get there that day. Really indebted to him. Thanks, Greg. And was released about a week after that. Again, this is 2020, and I'll bring us back. The night I got home from that week-long stay, you know, they put me on a different medication, took that medication that evening, and became more suicidal than I'd ever felt in my life. And it just felt like a done deal. Like, you're going to do this tonight. It's done. It wasn't a conscious conversation internally. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was like a compulsion. And I'm confident it was from the medication. So I stopped that medication, called the VA the next day, talked to a nurse practitioner. She's like, yeah, maybe don't take that again. I was like, yeah, you think? That was rough. That was really rough. And talk about having an example that made me feel like I wasn't getting the care I needed from the VA. I mean, that was just like the pinnacle of what I would call poor care from the VA. So fast forward to, you know, 22, 23 is where I started. 23 is when I was introduced to psilocybin. March 18th, 2023. My partner and I, Kim, we journeyed together, and it was honestly the most beautiful thing that I'd ever, you know, it was just incredible.
Yeah.
You know, expansive sense of consciousness, a feeling of being connected, like all is connected, all is one kind of a thing, ineffable. Was able to work through a pretty hairy situation from my combat tour, kind of a hairy convoy, where an ALP, a local Afghan police, had jumped up onto my truck. And it was a time when folks were dropping grenades into the turrets of ISAF trucks, so that was stressful. Worked through that in a way that I just could not have done in talk therapy.
Yeah.
Started to forgive, feel as though I could legitimately, genuinely forgive myself, others, like my ex-wife and some family members and my buddy, and just was not able to get there in any of the therapy sessions I went to, for 2 years. It was amazing. I woke up the next day and I felt like I want to go be with people. I want to go get out. I want to see nature. And I don't know, coincidentally, that particular experience is what led me and my partner to really develop an interest in photographing fungi. So we go around here and we, just locally, we find and photograph mushroom bodies, and other fungal structures.
Yeah, every time I do it, I never, after the fact, be like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Like you said, it's expansive. There's like a peripheral vision type of thing to it. To me, it helps me open up about something a little bit more and more every time. Gives me different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Some benefits. The only con to it for me is it increases the ringing in my ears that exists.
Okay.
That's the only bad part.
Yeah. I've got that tinnitus as well. Interesting. I'll have to pay more attention.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll just be like, all right, I'm going to write as I do this. Cause then I can look back at it and, kind of understand some stuff. So it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And, and honestly, psilocybin mushrooms are a really great entry point for anyone who is curious about entheogenic medicines or, psychedelics. Yeah. Psychedelics as a word, as a term, is kind of the stigmatized term,
Yeah.
But it's a cool term. I mean,
I've also quit drinking, and I'm almost at end of month number 3. And every time I get an itch, that's my go-to, and that's all I need.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
It's a way to wean off,
Yeah, and for me, back to 2023, that initial flood dose of psilocybin, and we chewed it too. I mean, we took the mushrooms and just chewed it, and it tasted like dirt, but it was the experience. About 2 weeks later, I was drinking at that time, and we probably even drank that day when we did the trip, that first journey. It took about 2 weeks after that first trip. Kept drinking a little bit each day, nothing terrible, a couple beers, 2, 3. And then I remember my daughter was here for a weekend. I took her back home, came back, and had a bunch, just had a bunch of drinks. Woke up the next day and just felt like shit, just felt so beat down, unable to think. It's like I lost that expansion that the mushroom had provided to me.
Was it because of drinks?
Yeah, for sure. It was the alcohol. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And it was that day that I decided to stop, and I haven't had a lick of alcohol since.
Yeah. I look at, drugs totally different now from, does this make me better or not?
Yes.
That was a big part of the whole alcohol thing, is like, this doesn't make me better now. There was a time it definitely did, but that whole bell curve of, how it works, it used to be, a slight incline until it was like, all right, done. Now it's just like, it was like, straight up, straight down, done. Just because it was, it was a race. I'm an all-in type of guy, so
yeah,
it didn't work too well.
Yeah, same. I mean, if I'm going to have one, I'm going to have 12. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can't even have, I've tried the NA beers. Some people can do the NA drinks and the NA cocktails, and I just can't.
Yeah, what's the point, right?
It reminds me of, why would I drink this and have these empty calories and not have the fun? Also, I don't want to have that fun anymore,
Yeah.
I love what you said though, man. It's just a beautiful perspective. Does this serve me? I'm going to use a different term. Does this serve me or does this not serve me? And, right. These types of medicines, entheogenic medicines, psilocybin, ibogaine, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, these things take us to a place when approached respectfully and with intention, they take us to a place of greater self-care.
Yeah.
And they help us, in my experience, and from what I keep hearing from others, they help us remember what's true, help us remember ourselves, and just help us have a better perspective on how to live well in ourselves, in our families, and in our communities.
You've done ibogaine, haven't you?
I have.
Give a little bit of background for the listeners. I want to get into some videos. I just recently listened to Texas ex-governor Rick Perry, ultra-conservative, never consider this type of plant medicine. He took Marcus Luttrell into his house for 2 years and saw what this did for him. Mm-hmm. And now he's devoted the rest of his life to making it legal, and he's trying to get Texas ibogaine initiative pushed through by September 2025, I think, based off the episode. I want to put up some of those clips.
Yeah.
So for you, how'd that go?
Yeah. Some context around it. I was with this company called Greencastle. Was starting to falter in my performance, client conflict, and it wasn't a good fit. Still having daily and weekly mental health periods of distress.
Frustration, anger.
Frustration, rage, a ton of self-hatred, self-loathing, suicidality, just like, screw all of this. I hate myself. I'm such a POS. I want out. And that's really hard to have as an experience daily. And it's really damaging.
Yeah.
And so I pulled myself off of a client project, and another project came up, and I said, no, I'm not interested. And they're like, well, this is the work, so you got to go. On the way out, that Naval Academy grad, SEAL that I mentioned, he was like, hey, have you ever heard of ibogaine or plant medicines? And, I said, of course I knew of plant medicines, had not heard of ibogaine until that conversation. And so he recommended I look into an organization called the Mission Within.
Boom. And they hit that in the episode too. I'm going to go straight to a video clip with that.
Let's do it.
All right. Yeah. Let's do it. All right. I believe we're going to hit 2 videos here. One's from a guy named, and W. Hubbard is what I captured. And that guy, yeah, he was in Kentucky. He was a legal counsel fighting the opioid epidemic, I believe. And as he's looking for solutions, he comes across this thing called ibogaine. And start with this
one. And since 2018, over 1,000 veterans have traveled to the Ambio Clinic south of Tijuana to receive ibogaine treatment for symptoms of traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. Because of the miraculous outcomes which were endorsed by the veterans who were receiving this treatment, a group of philanthropists funded a study out of Stanford University, which was led by Dr. Nolan Williams. And over the course of several years, a cohort of 30 veterans were evaluated before and after ibogaine treatment. They were evaluated comprehensively through the administration of a battery of psychological tests to quantify the nature and duration of their symptoms. They underwent pre- and post-treatment MRI scans. These scans were compared against a database which had been compiled of hundreds of thousands of healthy adult brains covering the human lifespan. And through an algorithmic assessment, the question was, what was the physiological effect upon the human brain, if any? To explain these miraculous outcomes were veterans who had been on the verge of suicide, who had been paralyzed by symptomatology associated with profound anxiety, profound depression. In many cases, veterans who were prescribed an array of habituating pharmacology which ineffectively addressed their symptomatology were not just back to what they could remember being before they experienced their trauma, but had been liberated from that pharmacology. The results of that study are nothing short of miraculous when it comes to the way in which ibogaine has been revealed to have significant neuroregenerative properties that impact the human brain, with profound implications for conditions for which there are no current effective treatments. Specifically, the white matter that covers the surface of our brains, which is the highway across which all of our thoughts and impulses travel, grew and thickened in size across the entire surface of each of these veterans' brains. The centers of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and executive functioning grew in size. The average reversal of brain age among this cohort of 30 veterans was 1.5 years, with the top 5 among that cohort seeing a reversal of brain age of almost 5 years. Right now, there are individuals who live offshore from the United States who are using ibogaine to effectively treat symptoms associated with multiple sclerosis, Lyme disease, and Parkinson's disease. Just about 2 weeks ago, Governor Perry and I had the privilege of spending some time with a researcher who is based out of the University of Zurich in Switzerland. This researcher has developed a protocol for the treatment of Parkinson's symptoms with ibogaine. We had the privilege of visiting with one of his patients who wishes to remain anonymous, as well as a family member of this patient. We were shown a video whereby this individual had developed Parkinson's disease at the age of 41. It had advanced so aggressively that by age 51, this gentleman was completely bedfast. As a last resort, he underwent an invasive intracranial surgical procedure called deep brain stimulation, where they drilled holes through his skull and implanted electrodes which were designed to stimulate the production of what is called glioneurotropic growth factor, which essentially stimulates the dopamine receptors to produce dopamine, the absence of which is implicated in the development of Parkinson's disease. And while this gentleman was no longer bedfast, he was not able to volitionally control his bodily movements. The video that we saw demonstrated his attempts to stand and walk, and the ability to walk was non-existent. After he had undergone the deep brain stimulation, he signed up for euthanasia services in the country in which he lives because it is legal, and he was at the end of his rope. He underwent a 4-week course of upward titration with low-dose ibogaine that did not produce a psychoactive experience. And at the end of those 4 weeks, that gentleman was able to stand, walk, and function as a normal human being. The outcome is nothing short of miraculous.
His mother said that he rode his bike.
Wow. Here's a guy that's, can't stand, does something, doesn't work, says, sign me up for death, and then does that treatment. He can stand and act normal again.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
Yeah, I'll get into that. I want to say first, real quick, there are hundreds of military veterans here in the U.S. with their own anecdote of benefit, with their own individual anecdote of benefit. So I went down and journeyed, sat with ibogaine, and 5-MeO DMT through the Mission Within. The Mission Within is run by a really wonderful doctor by the name of Martin Polanco. And he's been running this a clinic similar to the one Mr. Hubbard described. Ambio is one of the names that comes up. You won't find the Mission Within. If you search it up, you won't find their clinic. They don't have an actual clinic location. It's a private residence that they run clinical operations out of. And so I went down in September with an all-Marine cohort, the first all-Marine cohort that was part of a grant from another institution here in the U.S. I don't think I can name it publicly, but another Marine funded, just gave $1 million to the Mission Within. Hey, this is for Marines, and that's going to cover 100 Marines going through their programming. What it was like for me was, if you look it up, I mean, you can, I think Joe Rogan has a podcast, has an episode with Dakota Meyer, and he talks about his experience with it. And I think one of the more common experiences is this idea of a lifetime sort of movie reel, like you're going to see scenes from your life just kind of flash before your eyes, and you can go into each of those scenes and re-experience things and heal. It wasn't like that for me. The experience of the actual journey itself was very heavy, like physically heavy. I was kind of just stuck in the bed, purged a lot, sweat, shakes, vomit, diarrhea, really fun, beautiful stuff. And I don't know, some of the more, trippy things that the experience gave to me during the journey was I saw, different layers of reality. I saw through my eye mask. I saw the room through my eye mask. Physically impossible. I saw, entities and sacred geometries and just different things like that. So, some real psychedelic stuff. We also did 5-MeO DMT, or otherwise known as BUFO, because it's essentially the secretion of I'm going to get the name wrong. It's a Sonoran desert toad. That's what it is. It's the Sonoran desert toad. When that toad is distressed, it secretes sort of a mucus-like membrane across the surface of its body.
Yeah, it's the Ace Ventura dart.
Yeah.
Tranquilizer.
And it within that secretion is this compound called 5-MeO DMT. It's chemically different than DMT. And it's short acting, maybe 15 to 45 minutes, but extremely profound. The ibogaine experience was about a 12-hour experience. It was work. It was heavy. It was, it's a stimulant. So, that's why the shakes and the vomiting and the diarrhea. The 5-MeO experience for me took me back to childhood, to the loss of my childhood puppy, my dog. Really traumatic stuff that I had never grieved from. I'd never grieved, never moved past it. And, all told, the programming of the weekend, we spent, I don't know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday down there with the Mission Within, and all the clinical protocols, all the appropriate clinical protocols. Dr. Polanco was there. We had a practicing cardiologist on site for the.
Yeah, that's one of the risks. I got it in another clip I'm going to share is the high cardiac risk, but if managed correctly, is not a problem.
Correct. Yeah. And so, we had a cardiologist on site. We had nursing staff on site. We had IVs. We did blood work, urinalysis, EKG ahead of time. We were hooked up to heart monitors the whole time. So, very good clinical procedures to create the right setting, the right space, the container. We also had some trauma-informed therapists, licensed therapists there with us, who led us through some discussions, some therapy sessions, and helped us prepare our intentions leading into each of those ceremonies, each of the medicine journeys.
Yeah. Let's jump into Governor Rick Perry's take on it. Like I said, he'd taken Marcus Luttrell for a couple of years, dedicated his mission now is to work on this. So let's hear what he has to say from that episode.
I've been studying this. You ask a little bit more about in 2017, I went to Washington to be the Secretary of Energy. I asked Morgan Luttrell, Marcus's twin brother, former Navy SEAL, was working on his PhD in brain science, if he would put that on hold and come with me up to D.C. to work at the computers in the United States. There named Jeffrey Manley, MD, PhD, and he was doing some studies on the brain. Off my heels a little bit, and I was like, Morgan, you need to be careful. As I started educating myself about it, I was curious about it. Does this work, and why does it work? Then it's led to this study. Dr. Nolan Williams, PhD, MD at Stanford, oversaw the study that Brian just did a fabulous job of laying out there. 30 vets. They all had moderate to severe PTSD. They were all given a clinical psychological exam that put them into the moderate to severe PTSD range. Some of them had traumatic brain injury. Some of them had alcohol issues. I think 8 out of the 30 had tried to kill themselves. This was a highly overseen group that were treated, and the results, 88%, Joe, 88% of those individuals 6 months later had zero, not a little bit better, they had zero symptoms of PTSD. And I talked to Nolan within a few days ago, and it appears that even after a year that these symptoms are gone. This is stunningly powerful work. And again, medical institutions, the private sector, if this is what we think it is, this could be the greatest the greatest medicine brought to mankind in history.
Yeah, so that's Governor Perry's take on it.
Yeah, amazing. I still keep in touch with the guys that I journeyed with down in Mexico. One of them lives just about an hour from me here in North Carolina, and I was the only pogue in that group. Everybody else was a grunt. Everybody else was infantry, and they'd seen some stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just, man, it felt like home. That weekend felt like being back with the tribe again. Back with the Marine Corps tribe. And we stayed in a room. It was like a squad base, 6 very comfortable mattresses just kind of laid out on the floor, and then all of us there. And we start ripping each other and telling stories and, making fun of each other. And it felt like home. And, I gotta mention this compound is from the root bark of a shrub called the iboga shrub. And the iboga shrub is native to Central and Western Africa. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Bwiti tribe, because it's through their use that us Westerners have become a little more aware of it.
Gotcha. And it's, us Westerners, it is a Schedule 1 drug.
For us, it's Schedule 1, and that's why right now, guys like me and these 5 other, warriors went down and had to go to Mexico.
Yeah, let's. I got a clip on Schedule 1. I want to share that. Let's do it now.
Yeah.
Ibogaine.
Now, Schedule 1 says that there is no medical purpose for this compound, whatever it might be, and that it's addictive. And ibogaine is neither of those.
Right.
Clearly evidence. As a matter of fact, if there was a definition of a compound that was not Schedule 1, ibogaine would be the top of the list, most likely.
Yes, but yet it's Schedule 1.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for the purpose of educating the public, we go back and understand the early 70s, what Nixon was using these compounds for a political purpose, and he gathered them all up, swept them all up, and put everything under Schedule 1 so he could go after his political enemies,
Yes.
using these compounds as the vehicle to do that.
Yeah, and for the last 50 plus years, people have been imprisoned by that.
Yeah.
And that's a giant problem particularly for veterans, which is, I think, the most important use of these things, because it's going to open eyes to people that would never consider the concept of plant medicine or psychedelics. They would never consider.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure to get that in there as an educational thing. I thought it was interesting the way Perry put that it's neither of those things.
Yeah, it really is not. I mean, having sat with ibogaine, and knowing that it's been used for just thousands of years to affect, spiritual connection and ascension and expansion of consciousness and all that kind of stuff. Sure, but to really fight against and sometimes eradicate addictions, physiological addictions.
All right, we're going to another clip because you hit the key word, addictions. So that's another thing. The one we're about to jump to is Hubbard talking about a story of a heroin addict. Okay, he hits three things. He hits her story. He also hits how ibogaine resets the dopamine and serotonin levels in the body in the course of 36 to 48 hours, where if you were to quit your addiction or whatever that was, it would take 1.5 years for your brain to even start to naturally repair itself.
Just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's that one.
Historical context on the reality that you have just articulated. In 1962, a heroin addict by the name of Howard Lotsoff, whose widow, Norma, is still living in New York City, he was part of an underground subculture in the early 60s known as the Yippies. And Howard came into contact with ibogaine in 1962, and he took it out of curiosity just to see what would occur. After he took it, he discovered that his desire for heroin had vanished, despite a 9-year hardcore dependency. Howard, along with a guy by the name of Stanley Glick, a gentleman by the name of Dana Beal, joined also by a guy by the name of Dr. Kenneth Alper, were the original pioneers who essentially engaged in a decades-long process of developing observational field data which demonstrated that ibogaine had the unique ability to resolve physiological dependence on opioids. The mechanism of action was not understood and is still not understood. What is known is that the opioid-dependent brain does not have the capacity to produce its own dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine and serotonin are our baseline survival chemicals. They drive all of our most fundamental human instincts: the drive to eat, the drive to drink, the drive to procreate. The human body's natural physical capacity to produce dopamine at its maximum, as measured in what's called nanograms per deciliter, is 125 nanograms per deciliter. Opioids produce a dopamine response of 925 nanograms per deciliter, exceeded only by meth, which produces a dopamine response of 1,100 nanograms per deciliter. For years, individuals, as the opioid epidemic has played out in this country, with the detonation of OxyContin and the Appalachian Mountains in 1996, for years we looked at this problem as one of profound moral failure by those who found themselves trapped in addiction. What I learned in my roles in government was that was completely wrong. What we are seeing are the results of a profound neurochemical brain injury expressed by the shutdown of dopamine and serotonin in the brain due to opioid exposure. Ibogaine has the unique ability to restore the brain's dopamine and serotonin production to its pre-opioid exposure levels within 36 to 48 hours, thereby fully resolving physiological opioid dependence with a single administration for 80% of individuals the first time. That number goes to 97% with a second supportive dose. Wow. It is extraordinary, especially when we consider the outcomes that are produced by our existing treatment system. Addiction currently, you have two pathways. One is abstinence only, and the other is what's called medication for opioid use disorder, or what I refer to as opioid maintenance treatment. Outcomes associated with abstinence treatment are essentially a rate of success of 7%. And the reason for that is because it takes the brain 18 months of complete abstinence from opioids to recover its own individual dopamine and serotonin production. You have to be completely abstinent for 18 months before the brain begins to heal. Ibogaine shortens that to 48 hours. It is something that is not understood, but is concrete and real. One other thing is important to mention about its physiological properties.
The risks. Yeah.
Ibogaine can produce miraculous outcomes for individuals who find themselves substance dependent. Its applications haven't just been successful when it comes to opioid dependency. It is the only known substance to successfully treat meth dependency. And when we consider that the current street economy, the prevailing combination is fentanyl and meth, there is no more compelling circumstance to demand the accelerated development of this therapeutic than the current reality of drug dependency and death in America. The risk comes with misadministration. There is a significant cardiac risk which accompanies ibogaine. It has the propensity to prolong the beats between the heart, or what is called prolonged QT interval. The fancy word for it is Torsades syndrome. If an individual is given ibogaine improperly, it will slow and stop their heart and they will die. This is a very serious medication, and it must at all times be administered by a medical professional with a background in interventional cardiology, supported by a nursing team that can deliver the administration of atropine to stabilize the heart's rhythm if it goes out of whack during the course of treatment. The other important thing to know is, though that risk exists, it can be fully and completely mitigated by the co-administration of magnesium, a methodology that the best practice clinics in Mexico, I've had the privilege of going to two. The first was previously mentioned, which is Ambio south of Tijuana, and the other is called Beyond, and it is in Cancun.
BEON.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you remember a guy named Ryan Marco? He was a Mustang. He was my roommate.
No kidding. Okay.
No kidding. And talk about a guy that definitely had some PTSD. He used to get up at night, have these nightmares. He'd walk around and tell everybody to put their flak jacket on. Me just joining the Naval Academy, I'm like, dude, chill out, So not only that, I'm sure he had some concussions. He played Navy sprint football growing up. So there's some TBI there, and addiction, definitely addictive personality. He overdosed.
Yeah.
And passed away. Really good dude. He's one of those guys, like everybody knew him on the yard. That loud,
always smiling, always gregarious.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, not only just people like that, but think of all the fentanyl walkers that you see, and man, what a powerful, treatment.
It's yes. And, Mr. Hubbard, I think, said it best. There's no better rationale than what we can see in our communities around us to develop this, as a legal mechanism within appropriate frameworks for use, like as soon as possible. It
Yeah.
does not have the risk of addiction. It does not have, the risk of abuse or things. I mean, of course, people.
Yeah, you're vomiting. You got diarrhea.
It's not fun. It's not fun.
Not fun, huh?
I would do it again for the spiritual journey, for the more ineffable thing. But it's not a fun experience at all.
Yeah. Hubbard talks about, in my last clip from this, Hubbard talks about the spiritual connection part.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. And this also includes the three concrete realities of the substance on his
Folks
take.
who have gathered around ibogaine to push for its accessibility within the U.S. medical system. On January 31st of 23, I gave a presentation to Attorney General Cameron, and I said, I believe we have found Kentucky's Manhattan Project opportunity. And I laid out what the concrete realities are of ibogaine, and they are three. Number one, it resolves physiological substance dependence on an accelerated time frame in a manner that frees an individual from the physical consequences of their dependencies. Number two, it has a profound psychological effect for the individual, whereby on the back end of treatment, having been physiologically restored, they have a sense of ownership over their self and their future, whereby they will live a life that is defined by choice rather than compulsion.
Sense of ownership.
And that is a fundamental quality that one must have if they are going to rebuild their life. Mm-hmm. Finally, and most significantly, many people, the overwhelming majority of folks who have an ibogaine experience, come away with an affirmation that they are a spiritual being who is made in the image of an eternal creator whose essence is pure and unconditional love, and that creator has conferred a special and unique purpose on their life to be achieved.
Yeah. So, with the risks, the cardiac risk, something that you're into is heart rate variation. Right. Tell us more about what you do there. You got a certification.
Yeah.
What's that?
So I've been certified. When I came back from the retreat in September, I got in touch with an organization called Boot Campaign. And they have a health and wellness. They're a nonprofit. They provide really just great care to veterans through their offerings. They have a health and wellness program, and through that programming, I was connected with an HRV coach, a heart rate variability coach. Certified by an organization called HeartMath. HeartMath, this is a bit circuitous. HeartMath has been around since I think the early 90s, and they've conducted clinical research, peer-reviewed, published in multiple journals about the rhythms of the heart, how those rhythms influence certain areas of the brain, and then have immediate effect on the central nervous system. Now, this is not, I just want to be clear, using a HeartMath technique or focusing on heart rate variability is probably not the mechanism to mitigate the cardiac risk of ibogaine.
Sure.
Mr. Hubbard say it's magnesium and, a clinical team there in case of any kind of upset. But heart rate variability techniques within which I've been certified just last month, went through a certification course through HeartMath. These techniques offer real-time impact on your central nervous system, real-time impact on the clarity of your cognition. There's a technique that's public domain that I could share here if you're interested. It's called quick coherence. It takes about a minute and a half.
Quick coherence.
It's a breathing exercise. It is, so the whole thing about HeartMath techniques is focusing on the heart. And if you want, I can just read this off and
yeah, go for it.
I encourage you and the listeners to, participate, do it. All right. So focus your attention on the area of your heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. You just find an easy rhythm that's comfortable for you. So just breathing in and out. And as you continue that heart-focused breathing, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. And really just thank you. Thank you for participating. Really, the whole crux of that is focus your attention on your heart, slow your breathing down a bit more deliberately, and then try to remember in your body, in your mind, the feeling of a regenerative emotion. Those emotions, our emotions from our past, the emotions we can feel today, they don't have a timestamp on them. You can feel that emotion again right now, and your body doesn't know the difference. And when you do that, this is the quickest way to get into a state called coherence. Coherence is when your heart rate variability is a bit more sinusoidal, smooth waves. That has an immediate impact on the executive functioning portions of your brain. The part, Hubbard mentioned it, the part that's involved in emotional regulation, parts that are involved in future thinking, organization, etc. It's an immediate change. And when that happens, when you become more coherent, there's a cascade of about 1,400 chemicals that begins to occur throughout your body, influenced through your central nervous system. And this is a way that we can immediately, in real time, manage our stress responses. It's a bit different than just breathing. You can do breath exercises, and there is success around that. You can meditate, and there is success there. These techniques are backed by peer-reviewed, published clinical science. And I'm interested, Tony, as we did that, how was that experience for you?
It made me feel like I did some psilocybin.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No kidding.
No kidding. That's the first thing I thought of.
What is that like?
Well, because what it does for me is connects memories.
Okay.
I struggle with memories. There's a lot of times when my wife will say, "Hey, you remember this?" or from a month back, or no, don't remember it. That helps bring memories back.
Okay.
And that connection to the memory is helpful.
Yeah.
For whatever.
Yeah.
Usually goes back to good memories. Sometimes bad ones, but the majority are good ones.
That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah.
This is a technique I use daily. There are, there's a panoply of other, had to throw an SAT word in, there's a panoply of other techniques, again, backed by science. So I got certified as a heart math trainer in December, day before Christmas, actually. And working through the programming facilitated by my HRV coach that was made available to me through boot campaigns offerings has been, it's just been monumental. I still struggle with rage, and I still struggle with an overdeveloped fight or flight response.
Your animal brain.
Well, animal brain, but also as a Marine, we go to the peak and then we come right back down. There's no downslope. There's no off gassing.
Yeah.
We are
always on,
imbued with this essence, this ethic of, if something's going to happen, you're going to go full, manage the situation, neutralize the threat, and then you come back. But
one of the
dysfunctional fight or flight response.
One of the reasons why I threw out the animal brain thing is I got one more clip from Mel Gibson, and he's talking about his animal brain, fight or flight, exactly what you're just talking about. I want to put that in there. It's around, when you talk breathing, it's oxygen, right? So he talks about how he was going through a time and PTSD was part of the conversation, and we'll get to it. But he, what worked for him was a hyperbaric chamber, oxygen,
Yeah.
breathing techniques. So let's jump to that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, I think so. And he came over and he sat next to me, but very slowly and cautiously. And he says, "No, you're not." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You got the worst case of PTSD I have ever seen." And I said, "You mean like even worse than guys in war and shit like that?" And he goes,
So prior to this, he was talking about his animal brain, how he's stuck in this fight or flight mode for a while, and he's talking to this brain doctor. Okay, so that's the context.
"Yeah." And he says, "You're not okay."
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, I started to well up, you know, like, no, I'm not. You know, it's like,
Oh boy.
and it was, he had a very miraculous and great remedy for it, which was to eat a bunch of fish oil, vitamin B complex, and get into a hyperbaric chamber for 40 sessions. But make sure you do at least 2 or 3 a week. It fixed my head.
Really?
Yeah, it got me out of that wacky place, you know?
So it was something to do with nutrition and
Yeah. And your brain is neuroplasticity. He explained neuroplasticity to me and how, okay, you could get brain damage and like holes in your head and, you know, concussion. I used to play rugby. You know, and I've been knocked out on the field a couple
You got the rugby shirt on.
of times, you know.
that explains a lot.
You know.
Yeah.
And so it actually, you can actually heal the holes in your head. It looked like Swiss cheese in there. It's like horrible. There's a lot of these football players get like that too. The poor guys, I mean, they get depressed and they get,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Hormonal imbalance, pituitary glands fucked up.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
not producing testosterone or human growth hormone correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah, depression, low energy,
Yep.
irritability.
Irritability, you want to kill somebody, you know, it's like terrible
Yeah.
thing, you know. And that's just not socially acceptable. Plus I don't want to go to prison.
Yeah.
So-
Well, the rugby.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. You know, I'm listening to almost all of them. Sometimes I'll go all the Rogan stuff. Sometimes I'll start one. I'm like, yeah, not into this one. Next. But I like Mel Gibson.
Yeah, that's
and
what
I thought that was a good clip.
Yeah, it's interesting about the hyperbaric chamber. You know, that essentially like a dive chamber, right? You go down to a deeper depth. I knew a dude who a guy I was enlisted with, served in Okinawa with, who had been in Afghanistan in 2002 or 2003, and then was in Iraq many years later and got blown up a couple times. I think he was involved in a couple different blasts. And he was doing hyperbaric chamber stuff down at, I think it was San Antonio, the medical facility down in San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston. And it seemed to give him some benefits too.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something I'm thinking about. Like, I was a big drinker. To sustain that, I got really good at exercise. I got really good at nutrition. I did a gene test, figured out my gut genes so that, I took the right vitamins for the best nutrition possible for my body and what it methylates. Got into biohacks, did the cold plunge. I do the sauna every time I go to the gym, which is awesome. Started the, psilocybin thing. And then, so I got really good at all those other things. I just had one little hanging chad, and that was the drinking thing.
Yeah.
And I went to a football game in Annapolis, and that was my last shebang. I had a lot of fun. And then I get on the airplane, or I go to my airplane after having a few drinks at the bar. And I'm like, hey, you're not getting on. What? This is not supposed to happen. And that was it. That was it for me. I caught a flight the next morning, made it home, ate some crow, and here I am today. So, I'm grateful for all those things that, addiction helped me figure out, all the health and nutrition parts of it. So I'm just, it's a good journey.
I'm really, it's awesome that you're sharing that, Tony. And from one sober guy to another, I'm proud of you. And I know there are guys and gals that we served with that are wrestling with that. I mean, alcohol is just, it's just common. It's what we do in the military, right? We drink and we fight.
Yep.
And interestingly, the Surgeon General just posted within the last 2 weeks, I think, a report that alcohol is the number 3 leading cause of unavoidable cancer. Avoidable cancer, excuse me. So
I know what you meant.
Avoidable cancer.
It's
we love it. We party with it. It's great. It's a social lubricant. It's awesome, but there's no benefit to your body or brain to consuming it.
It's a booger to dig out of too. It really jacks you up, especially for a long period of use. I mean, I'm just now starting to lay my head down at night and get better rest after 3 months of not doing it at all. It's like, before I was working on breathing stuff, like slowing my heart rate down at night. And like right before I go to sleep, I feel this like, almost like I'm about to fall type of feeling. I don't know if it's a heart palpitation or not, but like right when I feel that, I'm like, yes, I'm almost there, and then boom, gone. So right now I can get in bed and shut my eyes and go to sleep within 5-10 minutes versus, what used to take me an hour, sometimes 2, or maybe even 3.
For me, it was, I can't sleep more. And I would just drink until I was done. Like I couldn't stay awake anymore. That's how I would get to sleep for years.
Yeah. I mean, I through that, 3 months, I'd take a, sleep gummy or melatonin complex. And now I don't need anything.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's pretty cool.
What's really messed up, about alcohol is it can take your brain, if you get sober, it can take your brain up to a year for your brain cells to get rid of the alcohol that's been present in your brain.
Yeah. Not only that, think about concussions and the amount of inflammation that causes on the brain. And I can't remember the exact number, but it takes a long time for the inflammation from a single concussion to reduce back to normal. I want to say like 5 years. Don't quote me on that, but it is nuts. And drinking doesn't help for sure.
It doesn't.
So what about now? What's your mission and purpose now? Where are you going from here?
Yeah. Coming back from the retreat last September I've been on a different path, a new path, I'm still here, still have the same conditions around me, still have struggles with rage and sleeplessness. But I'm having an easier time navigating those things. What has changed is how I show up. What's really important to me now is prioritize my own health in really sensible ways and to pay it forward. I've conducted essentially like guided sessions for family and friends, of different breathing techniques and heart math techniques, to really increase coherence. That's why I got the certification, paid for that out of pocket, not cheap. What I'm trying to do now, what I want to do is work with guys and gals like you, guys like us, to help realize a little better state of things throughout the day. And that's with the heart math techniques. It's with some age-old meditation and breath work techniques that I've learned through one of my other coaches.
And through some really hard experiences.
And through some hard experiences,
that no one wishes upon themselves. They don't want to get into. Maybe you could help cut them off before it becomes a thing.
You don't have to hit rock bottom. Yeah. And, honestly, asking for help is a leadership strength. So be a leader and ask for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And through all this, if you had a good mentor through this, or is this kind of flying solo?
Have I had a good mentor? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Not really. I've had folks that have been around that have helped. I mentioned that Marine Greg who helped me get to the VA.
Yeah.
When I was about ready to pop. Navy captain in this area, retired 06,
Awesome.
has been really what's the word I want to use? Just responsive, and helpful.
Empathetic.
Generous with his time and helped me move from one house to another. Just so grateful for that kind of generosity.
Awesome.
And then I got to give a shout out to my partner, Kim, while maybe not a mentor, but certainly a support, a standby, somebody that has walked alongside me through many of these challenges.
Gotcha. Well, cool. So any folks that may be struggling with, PTSD, anger, rage, TBI, what would you say to them?
Don't suffer in silence. Ask for help. And for those that might know of a buddy who is struggling, don't let them suffer alone. Go and be with them. Don't just send thoughts and prayers. That's a good sentiment. It helps you feel good, but it does nothing for the recipient. It does nothing for the person who's suffering. Go and be with the person who is suffering. Like physically, go be with them. Go sit with them. Go put your arm around them, or just, I would say go have a drink with them, but don't do that. Go have a tea with them or something.
Coffee. Awesome. And then if you could ask the audience one question to reflect on their own leadership, what would that be?
Are you really being honest with yourself?
Got it. 2 more questions. Last one is, what's the biggest struggle you're working through today? Now that you went through that entire, valley, up the mountain, back down to wherever you are now, what's the, your latest?
Yeah. Still, like I said, I mentioned I still struggle with episodes of rage and self-loathing. It's less intense. It's less frequent. I can come back from those moments more quickly, but it's still there and it's still heavy. And kind of adjacent to that is struggling to get good care from the VA, which is why I'm working with the team at Boot Campaign to get better care.
Gotcha. Last question. What's your price of admission?
This is such a cool question. And you told me ahead of time, this is going to be more open-ended. And honestly, I think it's the path of suffering. And I know others on your show have said that. It's coming to the end of your rope over and over and still showing up. Stay in the fight. Sometimes the path is really hard, and sometimes you walk it alone. Stay in the fight. Don't quit.
Shamwa. Well, man, I appreciate your time today. Really good episode. It's a topic that I've been into lately. When I saw you on LinkedIn being vocal about, plant medicine, I was like, I need to talk to this guy. Let's figure out that story. So it was great. Again, thank you. And appreciate your time.
And thank you, Tony. I really appreciated you reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm really happy to be connected with you now.
Awesome. Take care, man. Reach out if you ever need anything, and any kind of links that you want to share. I'll put them in the notes of this episode, so people can go find it. Things that we talked about. I'll probably put the Rogan episode in there too, just because. But yeah, it was good.
Solid. Thanks, Tony.